Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are getting into the competitive matrix of the Emperor's Children in Warhammer 40,000 10th edition.
Yeah, and we're looking at some really fascinating high-level analysis here. It's less about which gun to take and more about, well, how a winning general really thinks.
Exactly. Our mission is to dissect their identity in the current 2K format, keeping in mind the latest balanced data slate, and we're focusing almost entirely on the coterie of the conceded detachment. This is about generalship.
Pure strategy.
Right. And to frame this, the analysis we've seen introduces a really core concept, the time versus space framework. Most of us think about armies as, offensive or defensive, tough or killy. But this suggests a different binary. Are you controlling where the opponent can play? Or are you controlling when they're forced to act? Okay, let's unpack that.
It is, I think, the single most clarifying way to look at 40K right now, especially for a faction as tricky as Emperor's Children. If you get that wrong, if you confuse your army's role, you will misuse half your units. Guaranteed.
So let's define them. What's a space unit?
Okay, so space units are your anchors. They control where the opponent can go and where they can't. They're usually static, they're durable, and they project this persistent, lingering threat.
Like Terminators on an objective.
Exactly like Terminators on an objective. They're holding a zone, denying movement lanes, and just daring the opponent to come closer. They're about control.
And then time units are the complete opposite.
The complete opposite, yeah. Time units control when the opponent has to act. They're your kinetic, disruptive pieces. They show up suddenly. They exploit a position that seemed totally safe a second ago.
Forcing a reaction.
Forcing an immediate and usually a bad reaction. They exist to throw off the enemy's tempo and get them off their game plan.
That distinction really reframes the whole army list. A space-heavy army is buying resilience, fixed positions. A time-heavy army is buying... what, speed?
Speed, threat projection, and burst damage. And that's the key. Because when you apply that lens to the Emperor's Children, their identity just snaps into focus. They're overwhelmingly time-heavy and very intentionally space-like.
So their win condition isn't standing on a point and taking a punch.
No, absolutely not. They don't win by trading durability or winning some long-range firefight. They just can't. They win by making the opponent's safe spots unstable, by forcing them to move units a turn before they wanted to.
The sources draw this really interesting parallel to Eldari, which feels counterintuitive for Chaos Space Marines. It's all about tempo.
It's a perfect comparison because it's about manipulating the decision-making process. A traditional CSM list might take a hit and then punch back twice as hard. Emperor's Children don't take the hit.
They make the opponent run.
They make the opponent run, exactly. Their entire job is to punish static gunline armies by collapsing safety. A ranged army needs screens, it needs static positions, and it needs clear firing lanes. The EC toolkit is designed to methodically remove all three of those things.
You're not trading shots, you're forcing them out of cover into the open.
And that's where you kill them.
Okay, so let's talk about the engine for this. The coterie of the conceded detachment and its pact mechanic, kill things, get bonuses. This seems to be a major stumbling block for players.
Oh, this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because the critical mistake, the trap everyone falls into, is thinking, I have to kill something early to get pact and turn my army on.
Right, I need that bonus now.
And that leads to terrible trades. You see people throwing a 200-point unit of flawless blades away just to kill a 50-point screening unit to get one level of pact.
That's a huge loss. The pact becomes a distraction.
It's a complete distraction. The correct way to think about it is this. You use your time units to force positional mistakes. Killing things happens naturally as a result of that. Pact is not the goal. It's an accelerator. It's the reward you get for making your opponent scramble.
So if you get packed because you've cornered them, that's a win. If you get it by sacrificing your best unit,
you've already lost. Yeah. The pact just tells you that your positional game is working.
Okay, let's get into the units, the actual tools for this. The time igniters and, as the notes call them, space rental pieces.
Right. It all starts with the infractors and Lord of Exultant. They're your tempo ignition. I'd call them a hybrid, but leaning heavily into time. And critically, they are pact agnostic.
Meaning they're dangerous right out of the box.
Dangerous from turn one. They don't need any bonuses to be a threat. Their whole job is to force a predictable response. Kill a screen, threaten a backline objective, flip a point.
The analysis compares them to a pawn sacrifice in chess. You accept the loss to open up the board.
That's a perfect way to put it. Their death is fine, it's acceptable, if it collapses the enemy's position. If it forces them to expose something they wanted to keep safe, They're not there to survive.
And their transport, the humble rhino, seems way more important than just a transport.
It's the ultimate time enabler. And a space rental tool. It's not just a box. The key is its ability to advance and then have the unit inside disembark.
Ah, so it projects a future threat.
Yeah, a huge one. A rhino moves up, and suddenly the opponent has to respect an 18-inch bubble where your noise marines could be next turn. You're destabilizing their firing lanes without even committing your expensive unit. You're renting that space.
And for pure, cheap disruption, we have Chaos Spawn.
Pure time units. All they do is mess with your opponent's timing. They screen out deep strikes, they block movement lanes, and most importantly, they can run up and just tag a big shooting unit,
Forcing it to fall back.
denying it a whole turn of shooting. Their death is their purpose. They die to buy your real hitters the time they need to get in position. They are a roadblock.
Okay, so the board is destabilized. Now we bring in the Punishers, the units that turn that chaos into a win. Let's start with the Winged Demon Prince.
He's a hybrid, what I'd call space time breaker. His value isn't just his damage output. It's his ability to just invalidate a firing position. He forces a big, expensive gun platform to either move or die.
So his value goes up the more screens you've cleared.
Exponentially. The infractors clear the chaff, the prince flies in and removes the linchpin. It's important to contrast him with the footprince, who is a true space anchor. He holds ground. The winged prince makes ground untenable for the enemy.
Okay, next up, the Mauler Fiend. A fast melee threat, but the analysis is very specific about how to use it.
Yes, it's a time pressure missile, but it must act as a parallel threat. If your prince is threatening the left flank, the Mauler Fiend has to be in a position to threaten the right or the center.
Why is parallel so important? Why not just stack them up and overwhelm one spot?
Because a stacked threat gives the opponent one problem to solve. They can focus all their best defensive tools, all their best shooting, on that one spot and stabilize.
But a parallel threat?
A parallel threat removes any safe escape. It splits their resources, splits their attention. It creates vulnerabilities on two fronts at once. One of your threats is much more likely to get through.
And finally, the icons themselves, Noise Marines. They feel like they should be leading the charge, but the analysis says no. They're fragile, short-ranged, and held back.
They are the cleanup crew, the executioners. You wait. You wait for the infractors and the prince to force the enemy to move, to expose themselves. And when a key unit has to fall back or step out of cover,
That's when the Noise Marines come out of their rhino.
and just vaporize it. They punish mistakes. The Lord Cacophonist attached to them. He's just a time amplifier. He makes that one perfect moment, usually on turn 2 or 3, absolutely devastating. You can't risk him early.
What about Flawless Blades? They're lethal, but a bit slower. How do they fit?
They are reactive time units. They're your executioners for the midboard. The mental model is, whatever survives my first wave of trades cannot be allowed to stay here. They punish units that are already damaged or out of position. They mop up, ensuring a mistake is fatal.
And just to round it out, the bigger space units, Terminators and Fulgrim.
Terminators are conditional. They're second wave anchors. You only bring them in after your time units have already collapsed the board, and you need to hold the new, smaller space you've created.
And Fulgrim.
He's the apex hybrid. A time-triggered space collapse. He doesn't hold space passively, he just deletes it when he activates. You hold him. You hold him until the opponent commits their game-ending piece, and then Fulgrim comes out and ends the game for real.
This is a very complex stance. So what does this actually look like on the table? Turn by turn, what's the plan?
Turn 1 is all about minimal exposure and maximum threat. You're doing scout moves, you're positioning rhinos to create those future threat zones, your infractors might threaten a screen, but you're not making any big charges, you're just setting the table.
Priming the pump.
Exactly. Turn 2 is when you light the fuse, collapse screens, force responses, make the enemy move. That's for your infractors, your winged prince.
And turn 3 is the payoff.
Turn 3 is decisive. You punish the moves they were forced to make in turn 2. That's when the Noise Marines come out, the Flawless Blades clean up. That's when your pack should be spinning up and making you hyper-lethal.
But if you're so space light,
Yeah.
how do you actually score primary objectives? How do you hold anything?
That's the beautiful tension of the army. You don't need board control, you only need score control. In the endgame, turns 4 and 5, you've already maxed your score in that decisive middle turn. Now you trade your cheap time units, your spawn, a single infractor, just to block your opponent from scoring. You're playing denial.
It sounds like there's very little room for error. What are the common failure patterns people should watch out for?
4 big ones. First, confusing pact with victory. Getting the bonus but having no position to use it from is a net loss.
Right.
Second, using your time units out of sequence. sending Noise Marines in first,
Right.
or using the Prince as a solo missile with no follow-up.
Wasting the tool.
Third, and this is a big one, trading unit for a kill without forcing the opponent to move. If they kill your unit and just sit still, you've failed. And fourth, committing your space units, like Terminators, before you've actually created time pressure. They have nothing to anchor if the board is still wide open.
That's the key takeaway then. Adding space units doesn't make you a space army. It just gives you something to do once your time units succeed.
That is the core thesis. Emperor's children do not dominate the board. They dominate decision trees. They rent space. They don't own it. They force reactions. They don't absorb them. A good EC general wins by making correct play impossible for their opponent.
And if you see an EC player throw all their threats into one lane or commit everything at once, you know the puzzle has been solved. They've lost that decision tree.
They've made it simple. An EC cannot win a simple game.
Okay, for final thought for everyone to mull over. We've classified Fulgrim as that apex hybrid finisher, the final move when the trap is sprung. So if a general feeling pressured deployed him aggressively on turn 2 to try and force the issue, what are the cascading implications for the rest of the army's sequencing and its ability to apply time pressure? Something to think about until our next deep dive.